and welcome all in another episode of Kiran's Architect Show. Likewise, this would be another conversation I'm always having with amazing individuals. Today, I'm taking on board Sister Aadila Pretorius, where I'm a little overwhelmed with her huge and phenomenal bio, which I would love to share with my viewers. Sister Aadila Pretorius is an ethnopsychologist, hypnotherapist, NLP and neurosemantic practitioner, life, business, relationship, communication, and excellence coach. She is practicing since 2001, registered with Hypnotherapy and Ethnomedicine Practitioners Association of South Africa. She deals with people's depression, anxiety, childhood trauma, bereavement, overcoming abuse, anger management, worthless, and rejection. She also deals with self-confidence, self-image, self-worth issues, and she helps with marital issues as well, separation, divorce, and meditation. Today's topic will be discussing about gender-based violence, which is a very relevant topic. Every day, women is being victim of gender-based violence by harassing, physical torture, in their homes and in the society. And that's why I've invited Sister Aadila Pretorius to talk about this issue. So let's get her on board. So, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Aadila. How are you doing today?
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah, and yourself?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. Thanks a lot for joining. It's an honor for me,
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so I'm going to start from here. First, I would want to know the causes of gender-based violence. As you know that we are going to discuss about gender-based violence, and it's quite a relevant topic because you can see that these days, especially ladies, they are being targeted a lot more about. So the causes of gender-based violence, and especially why women are the most victim.
Well, first of all, I think if we can break it up in different categories is, from external factors, we can say the biological aspect that men are, of course, stronger than women, and it's an exertion of that power over a female in order to control her. So it's the biological aspect. Then, of course, there is the socialization, is, rape culture, the inequality, the harmful gender norms that, people promote, and the conditioning that comes with that thing. And then, of course, there's also the cognitive factors in the sense of how you are brought up to think about women. Because if you think women are objects to be owned, or you are brought up to hate women, to be misogynic, where you are hateful towards women, all these type of things, because if you think a certain way, you're going to feel a certain way about that person, and then you're going to treat that person in a certain way. Your behavior is going to show what is going on the inside for you as a person. Then, of course, there's also the factors like, situational factors, in the sense of if there is a war, we always find in war there's more rape, there's more violence, this type of thing. And of course, when there is, like now what we are facing, what COVID, the pandemic has done, it has really destroyed a lot of economies. A lot of people are suffering financially. And the minute we have financial pressures, that in itself puts a lot of pressure, especially on the men, because remember, men are conditioned that is their pride in order to provide. Yes. And now when there is these financial constraints and difficulties, for a lot of men, it affects how they feel about themselves. Yeah. And they've got additional pressures. Now they cannot provide, their income is cut, and all that accumulates. And then, at the same time, the woman also needs to start taking, cognition of, becoming aware of, when this happens, what do they need to do in order to avoid falling into the trap of being abused? These are some of the, call it external factors, if we can refer it to that. What I would say for me, at the root of gender-based violence, is that we need to understand that male children, men, are not born violent. Okay. We teach them to be violent. And how does that happen? They either grow up being treated violently themselves, where they experience violence, or they model a violent parent.
Yes.
So we teach them to be violent, you know, and the sad part is a lot of the abusers come out of a conditioning or a childhood where it was a loveless childhood, a lot of criticism, a lot of judgment. Look, it's not the same for everybody, but some of them come out of households or, you know, where they were taken care of in homes, in foster homes, where a lot of criticism, a lot of judgment, or loveless situations, or a very hostile situation where they were, you know, not well treated and they were stripped of their self-worth, their self-love, their self-respect, or the opposite end where it is a parent that is very violent and they start to model that behavior as that is correct, that is the way life is. We should treat women that way. And they are actually taught to misuse their power. Okay. So there's two possibilities in my view that could have gone wrong. Why do we have abuse in our societies? You know, and then yes, the other question is, or the other part of the question is why women? Because number one, women are, you know, we are physically less stronger than a man. You know, you can take the strongest woman in the world, there'll always be a stronger man, you know, and it's got a lot to do with the need to control. You know, the definition really of wanting to abuse a person, you know, it has got a lot to do of wanting to control the other person. And again, it goes back to, for me, in the psyche of the abuser, what are they trying to, the psyche always seeks to heal itself. So the question is, what is that person on the psychological level trying to reclaim? Are they trying to reclaim self-worth, self-confidence, self-love? Because the need to control is an external show off of my power. I'm in charge. I'm not in control. And then you ask yourself, where were they robbed of feeling in control of their own lives? That it's now such a need for them to have this exertion of power, to feel in control, to feel in charge. You know, so for me, these are some of the root causes of why we have gender-based violence.
All right. Okay. Now, suppose, and one thing I would want to touch upon that, you know, gender-based violence is not only stigmatized with physical violence, it's also connected with emotional violence as well, where people, you know, with verbal taunts and gaslighting they use. So I would want you to just shed some light, you know, on it, and as well, which is, of course, you know, that it's a taboo and people do not want to talk about it.
Yes, and it's very, very important. It's a very, very pertinent and very important question, because a lot of ladies or people that do find them in abusive situations, the abuse is not only when you get slapped in the face, or definitely. you know, a blue eye or a bloody nose. The abuse normally starts before that. The emotional abuse, the psychological abuse. Then it builds up to the verbal abuse and then the physical abuse. Sometimes, yes, you might walk into a relationship where there is physical abuse very early in the relationship, but it's not that common. It's normally a build-up. And then we also find that when a person is in an abusive relationship, that itself has a certain cycle. In the sense of there is the period or the time frame where tension builds up. There is arguments, there is fighting, there's quarreling, blame, all this type of thing that goes on. And then from there, from the tension period, it goes into the violent period, where now it becomes physical. Now there's hitting, slapping, kicking, throwing, you know, and it becomes really physically violent. And normally after that is where we have like the calming period, where things tend to calm down, because now there is that sense of guilt almost that the abuser feel, and it's like, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I promise. Oh, it wasn't so bad. You know, so and this is sort of the cycle from, and then it builds up again. The tension builds up, it goes violent again, and it goes to the calming period. So it's very important that once again, we recognize that, and we need to understand the aim of the abuser is to control their victim, and how by being violent, and violence to me is not just the physical. Sometimes a harsh word is violent to a person's soul. You know, violence, to me, it's got a very broad definition, because you can say something that's very hurtful to another person and you have violated their internal peace, you have violated their self-confidence, you know, all these type of things. So that's why we need to understand that part of that control is that the abuser wants the victim to doubt themselves. They want to psychologically distress this person, because the more the victim is out of balance, out of their own norm of self-confidence and who they are, the more they have control. So to give some examples, and it's very important that we go into depth with these little things, because a lot of people, you know, especially us females, when you're in love with a person, you know, we wear rose-colored glasses and you only see the good in that person. You know, you don't see anything bad.
Yes,
and
definitely.
that's, you know, and it is sad, because you are in this love bubble, and then already there's these holes being poked into this bubble because certain abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, starts to happen. Now, I want to give some of these examples, and the reason for that is not only to help our victims to start identifying, but hold on, he does this and he says this, and you know, and there's already that mingling feeling. Most people, you know, women are normally very intuitive, as men are, but our soul and our spirit can already pick up that there's something not right, something is not sitting right. So, and it is to listen to that internal voice, but also to go through some of the examples is, for example, emotional blackmail. If a person starts to withhold their love, they don't message you back, or they don't tell you I love you, that in itself starts taunting at the other party. Then of course also is they'll divert attention away from their own flaws and shortcomings, but they'll point out yours. So they start to blackmail you, they start to play on your emotions, you're not good enough. Right? Or they will also draw on your values to say, oh yeah, you say you're a nice person, but you behave like that. So that is blackmailing you to start doubting yourself. Then of course they've got unreasonable expectations and demands that they can put on you. It is all about serving them, serving their needs. They have to be okay. You start to not exist anymore. Your needs, your wants is not so important. And also they're demanding in the sense of you need to agree with their opinion, with their view. So you as a person stop to exist. It's all about their expectations, their demands, what they need. And again, it's a form of abuse because you stop to exist. And there should be an equal partnership. Both parties are equally important.
Definitely, yes.
Then of course, there is that they discredit your thoughts and they discredit your emotions. In other words, they'll tell you, oh, you know, you're too sensitive. So they dismiss how you actually feel, or they'll invalidate. Now you're over-exaggerating. So again, it's a dismissive behavior, discrediting, you know, that your feelings is not really real and it doesn't really matter. Then also they'll go into denying or what they have said or what they have done. So they start to lie, or they start to gaslight. No, you're mad, it wasn't like that. So again, that psychological abuse of, you know, is this right? Did I understand correctly? Maybe I was wrong. So those are all signs of abuse. Then of course there is the creating of an unstable environment. In other words, that you will come home and there's a change in the mood. All of a sudden, you know, instead of being a happy person coming home, now he's all abrupt and upset. So you start living on eggshells because you don't know what's going to happen next, how this person is going to react if the food is not warm enough, or the shirt is not ironed proper. So and they'll also start to argue over little things, little items. They'll nitpick on everything, so that you start to feel unstable, that you're constantly anxious, constantly on eggshells. They'll sit and watch you when you're preparing a meal. They'll see how you are dressed. So everything becomes, you actually start to become overly obsessive as to this person. I need to be perfect. I need to fit into their mold. And that in itself is, again, not correct, because you need to be your own person. You need to be loved for who you are, respected for who you are, and vice versa. And then, of course, the verbal abuse, they can start belittling you. Words such as, "Oh, you're so stupid, you don't know anything." They can start blaming you. It's because of you we don't have any money. You like to shop. And of course, they can have condescending and patronizing jokes or statements or remarks that they'll make on your person, on your capabilities, breaking down, "Oh, you don't know how to cook," or "Look how ugly your shoes are," so very condescending. So they subtly keep breaking you down as a person. Yes.
So
and
it would be, it would be becoming like more fault finding kind of situation, where we would just try to, serve the best way, to do the best way, but there would be always just, we need to keep in mind that, now there would be fault finding, whatever we do, whatever the case would be, that, but he is going to, point it out on anything.
Exactly. And that is sad, because it strips away your confidence and your self-concept and your self-esteem. And part of the other control tactics that they have is that they will accuse you of cheating. They constantly would want to know where you are. And again, that exactly what you're saying, the constant criticism, the constant judgment. And part of those control tactics is then to also start isolating you.
Yes.
Cutting off friends, cutting off family.
Yes.
Keeping you away. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm now coming on to this question as well. So what could be now harmful effects on, women herself, like suppose as a wife, daughter, or even as an employee, if she's working in an office kind of environment? And what are the impacts, of could be on other family members, to those family members close to the gender-based violence victim, and especially like suppose impacts on children, when somebody is having children.
Look, it's a broad question. To start off on the first aspect of some of the harmful effects on the victims, is that many of them end up with very similar symptoms as post-traumatic stress disorder, the PSTD. And some of that they'll have painful memories or flashbacks. There's a sense of helplessness, hopelessness. They socially also withdraw. They struggle to sleep. They can have an increased heart rate. Then, of course, your mental disorders like anxiety disorder, depression, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and a lot of bodily stuff that can also go wrong. You'll start having more tension in your muscles, more aches and pains. Your immune system diminishes and you get sick more easily. So those are some of the direct and physical aspects and psychological impacts that the effect of abuse can have on a person. And then, of course, like we discussed in our introduction, is that when you are abusive and your child grows up and witnesses that, either the child will become an abuser himself or herself, or they grow up very taunted and very, pulled apart themselves as, is this what life is? Is that the norm? Is it okay to be abused? And they will accept it as the norm, and we perpetuate that cycle of abusers and victims, where we actually need to empower people and say, no, that is not the norm. But remember, children do what we do. So it's very, very important. If we want to teach children respect, we need to exude respect. We need to live a respectful life as adults. If we want to teach our children to be loving and kind, we as adults need to behave in a loving and kind manner, to each other as spouses or as partners, and to our children.
Yes.
So the ramifications, what we do as adults, it's huge. It's really very, very big. In the long run, we create the next generation.
Yes.
So it's important that we take responsibility for how we behave in front of our children, and become accountable. If we are doing things wrong, is we need to turn the tide. We need to take responsibility.
Yes, definitely. Okay, now suppose now the victim of gender-based violence can deal, suppose, in this regard to his or her mental health, and like now he is suffering with this mental health issues. So who should they seek help to?
Look, there's two aspects, obviously. The one is the victim that obviously needs help. And we know that in South Africa there is the SADC helpline that they can contact, and they just have to Google the SADC helpline. I think it's quite easy numbers, and I can give it out later in the show if needs be. And I think there shouldn't be anything that stops abusers to seek out help as well. If they listen to what I've just said, the different examples, really going into all these little things that abusers do other than the physical violence, if they can recognize themselves, look, I realize that I do these things, I hurt other people, I fall into this category, nothing should stop them to reach out and say, look, you see, the biggest thing of transformation is becoming accountable, acknowledging I have this problem, whether you are now the victim or whether you are the abuser. For the victim, it will have a lot to do with really acknowledging, and that's sometimes very difficult for the victim, because remember, we all want to be successful in life. We all want to feel I made a good choice. And for many times for the victim, it's very difficult, because now they have to come to that place to realize, but I am in a very difficult situation here. I am in an abusive relationship, and how do I deal with it? Because remember, part of acknowledging, you are also going to relive and re-experience some of that same emotions, which sometimes is difficult for people. But the sooner you can accept and acknowledge, this is where I'm finding myself in, the sooner you can start taking back your power and start asking yourself, how do I get out of it? And then if we also talk about the abuser, for themselves, is to, the minute they can start to acknowledge, that's when you can start working towards taking responsibility and saying, how do I change myself? And a lot, for both, victim as well as abuser, is to go back into childhood, to go and do the necessary therapeutic processes, or gain the necessary help to heal those parts of your life. To regain self-worth, self-love, self-confidence, so that you can be a valued citizen in this world and contribute positively to life, and not break down other human beings or abuse them. So for both, I would say the first step is acknowledgement. And yes, then of course it is, when we go to the side of the victim, is the second step would be is to understand how you now think of yourself was very much imprinted upon you by the abuser. And you need to catch those thoughts and say, I am not stupid. No, I am beautiful, or I know how to do this. Because you actually mentally have to now challenge these thoughts that the abuser imprinted inside of your being, and say, no, but hold on, I'm not. According to who? According to that person? Who is he? Who is he to make me feel or think that about myself?
Yes.
Right? So it's very, very important that you become aware of the negative thoughts that you have, the tape recording that's playing at the back of your head, and to start changing that. You know, and at the same time, it's, you know, if we try to overlap that with the abusers, is they also need to start asking themselves, but where does this tape recorder come from at the back of my head? I am an abuser. I hate people. I hate women. Women are like this. Where does that come from? So that they can start challenging that as well. Because like we said right in the beginning, men are not born violent. And I think, you know, in my personal belief, all souls are born good. We all have the potential to go back to that goodness. It is that conditioning, that programming, how we grow up, that makes us think that we are this. I am like this. And people need to realize that we all have the potential to change. We are dynamic. We're not static. We all have that ability to better ourselves. And it really comes from that place of self-awareness, acknowledging who you are, what you do, and realizing that you can change, you can better yourself, you know, and then further to that is what I would say is the third step. So you're first going to acknowledge, you're going to accept who you are, then you're going to say, what can I do about it? How do I change it? So mentally start thinking differently about yourself. And then obviously also then comes the self-care. Self-care, what are your needs? What are your wants? Without imposing it on the next person, this is between you and yourself. What are your needs? If you like good food, if you like art, if you like to do jogging, start doing stuff that gives you back yourself. Things that you like, your needs.
Definitely.
And then little other things also, like have a healthy eating plan, get enough sleep, have a good exercise plan, you know, and then also start connecting spiritually, you know, your spiritual needs. You must also have time and place for that. And very important is also, because in an abusive relationship, the idea is to isolate you so that you don't get help. So we can see that the opposite of that is the obvious. You need to reach out. You need to talk to someone. You know, if there is the fear that, you know, you can't talk to family members, then reach out to professionals, reach out to a helpline, but don't keep to yourself and say, I can deal with this, I can handle this. And before you know it, you may be 6 feet under. You know, rather say, I need help. This is what's happening. You see, the biggest thing is, and that's the next step, is that you need to set up boundaries. Boundaries is something that unfortunately may antagonize the abuser, and may lead to more tension, because now you are starting to take a stand for yourself, which is your human right to do so. And it is very important, because boundaries, you know, it is what gives you back your control over yourself. So it's very, very important that you do, and you don't rush this. You really have to go through this process. And then also it's note when you need to seek help. You know, when you realize, hold on, this person there is a threat here. He or she is threatening to hurt me, to kill me, or there's certain statements that they make. You know, and obviously if there has been physical abuse already, reach out for help. You know, don't go solo and think I'm going to handle, or the biggest mistake a lot of women make as well, being in this love bubble, I'm going to change this person. You cannot change anybody.
Definitely.
You can only change, you only have power and control over yourself. That person who's abusive need to realize that they can only change themselves. Nobody can do it for them. And for both victim and abuser, they both have to go through the journey of healing, of discovering about themselves, you know, reclaiming parts that they've disowned during childhood, whatever trauma they've lived through, and heal and transform, and then choose to reinvent themselves. But that whole healing process is such a crucial period in their lives, because it's during the healing process that you become accountable, that for the abusers, we talk about the abuser side, you know, the huge process of being able to say, I did this. I did this to another human being, and I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. You know, to really get that sense of realization as well as remorse. Because when you can really realize that you've hurt Allah's creation, you've hurt another being, and that penny drops, and you can fall on your knees and fall on your musalla and beg Allah's forgiveness,
Definitely.
really come to that realization, and then go to the people that you've hurt and harmed. Ask them for forgiveness. Because
Sorry.
why this process?
Yes, I wanted to know one more thing here, because one question was coming in my mind, and that is also interrelated, because sometimes, you know, and another question, but after this, sometimes, like, you know, the victim of gender-based violence, like, gets in a doubt of different types of fear, and that fear is just like, you know, as a social pressure, and like, and for children also, like, you know, what if separation would have bad impact on children, and that doubt, should he or she, you know, that have separation and become, sometimes they come and just keeping in that mind, you know, you give the abuser a lot more chances that, okay, now he's saying sorry, and you touched upon it also before that, you know, somebody would just come and say, abuser would say that sorry again, and then of course you just ignore them, because you would have the social pressure as well, that what people would say if you just go for making a decision of divorce or a separation. And, you know, of course, the keeping that fear in your mind of children's deprivation. Suppose if I'm going to take the divorce, what would happen to my children? Whether the abuser would just take away my children. So what could be the scenario then?
Okay, before I answer this particular question, I'm just going to wrap up on the previous thought I had, is that with the accountability, with taking responsibility, you know, asking, really getting that sense of remorse, repenting, asking the person for forgiveness. In conclusion on that thought, reformation, spiritual reformation and moral regeneration is closely linked to the cutting down of the ego. In other words, if your ego is of the nature where you are abusive, if you want to change that, you know, to lower yourself, because to ask forgiveness, you have to lower your pride. You have to lower and take responsibility. So just that's just in conclusion, that part of the whole process is that sense of lowering of the ego. And at the end of the day, that is actually what makes of you a better person, to be able to lower your pride. So to come to your question of separation, should you give another chance? I would really say to you, if a person knows you are in a volatile situation where you can get physically harmed, if not killed, is first and foremost, you need to try to remove yourself from that environment. Because why? You need to mentally become stable. You need to find your equilibrium and your internal balance again. So if it means that you need to take a separation, to go and live with a family member, go into a shelter, do that, because you need to mentally and psychologically and emotionally find some place of stability. So because when we are emotionally flooded, we cannot think clearly. Right? So, and you cannot heal in the same environment where you got sick. So it's very important, remove yourself from there. Okay. Gather your thoughts, gain your balance, cry your tears, because for a woman, the love, the longing, the wanting to be with that person, it's all part of who we are as human beings. At the end of the day, you need to come to a decision. Who do you love more? Do you love your spouse more, or do you love your own soul more? And if you realize that self-love is very much at the core of self-preservation. That's when you can move on, because you need to love your own soul more than being with that person, the idea of that person, the idea of that relationship, the idea of having a home. Because if you are 6 feet under, you are of no value to your children. So I am not saying just walk out and drop it. You ask, do we give a chance? I would say the time you give a chance to an abuser is as and when they are willing and able to acknowledge who they are, to accept the situation and how they present themselves, and having done the work, it's do not fool yourself and do not kid yourself. You're going to just stay there and he's going to change and it's a magical world. No, you need to navigate very carefully. If you still want this person in your life, they need to be totally committed to doing the work. And there's and there's no guarantee. There's no relationships are very much like contracts. It's risk. There's always risk involved. So and you have to learn to put yourself first. By putting yourself first, in many cases, you are putting your children first, because is an abusive situation the ideal situation that you want to have your children grow up in? Is that how the society you want to create? So again, I'm saying it doesn't mean we just shut the door and it's over and done and we don't give abusers a chance. Like I said earlier, we all are born with goodness inside of us. So too are abusers. So too are people that commit these deeds. And we need to be able to give them a chance, but they need to be able to live up to the certain conditions and expectations, because you as a victim cannot continue to be the victim. You need to be empowered. You need to feel safe. You need to feel like a normal being that can live a normal life, a happy life, and not feel on edge all the time. So if it is a choice that the parties make, they want to keep the relationship, both parties will have to go and do the work on themselves. That is truly what I would say. It's not just no, I'm going to change and we still live in the same house and there's no change. And sometimes divorce or separation is exactly and it's going to sound quite strange, but sometimes divorce or separation is exactly the medicine required for change. And you will find that sometimes people that are abusive or were abusive go through that process, because now they've lost the person that they've loved. Although they abused them, there is a measure of love or whatever it is for them. And for many of them, when they realize, but I don't have that person anymore, and they start realizing, but what have I done? And they go through that internal process, albeit by themselves, albeit with the help of a therapist. Through those years of separation, through those years of being divorced, it's sometimes the exact medicine that they needed to change, to transform, to become a better person. One never knows where that might lead to, if those exact parties may come back together. Sometimes the partner may have moved on, etc. But it's not always to look at, divorce is not death. Separation is not death. It is what you make of it, and it's how you look at it as what wisdom lies within it, what growth can lie within it. And again, it is, even if parties do not reconcile, but let's say the abuser have transformed, they've become a better version of themselves, there's always room for forgiveness and for friendship, and to behave like adults. Like mature beings, and not use the children as pawns against the other partner. It's all these little things, because at the end of the day, if we do engage by using our kids to use against our spouses, you only hurt the children. The children get, at the end of the day, they get traumatized.
Yes.
And it's not, I mean, your relational issues, it's not the child's problem. It's your problem. You, the adult, you know, do not use them as pawns to hurt the other partner in the relationship. So these are a lot of different things, a lot of, you know, a broad answer. But I think to be given a chance comes with great responsibility, you know, for both parties, and both need to be committed. You know, even if it is that they go and live separate and do the work, and they have occasional, you know, meeting to see, you know, is this person transforming, what change is happening, or joint therapy. But there are ways to navigate through this, because to just say, oh, I'll give you a chance, don't worry, and you're back at square one, you're not doing yourself any favors. Definitely. And neither are you doing your kids any favors.
Right. Okay. Now, a little bit irrelevant question is because now when relation is not only abusive of husband and wife, of course, that could be abusive for a daughter or sister or daughter-in-law, you know, to how to deal with it, like, you know, where separation is not a solution. How could you deal with that? And like, what would you say?
When it is internal within a family, sometimes, you know, we deal with parents that are narcissistic towards their children. It is sometimes very difficult to deal with, because again, if there isn't the acknowledgement of a parent realizing that I am X, Y, and Z, I behave in a certain way, I treat my children in a certain way, it is much more difficult to handle and deal with, especially when the children are younger, because they don't know any better. The problem normally arises when these children grow up, because now psychologically they are more developed, physically they are more developed, and they also have more vocabulary. So because as a small child, you don't know certain words and you can't express yourself. Right. So when you are now older and you are becoming an adult, and now you can talk back, that is normally when problems starts to arise, because the child can now talk back, tell you what they think. And in the day and age of technology, it's not so difficult to Google what is a narcissist, and you understand. So it's very, very important that we also teach our teenagers, reach out for help. You know, you don't have to stay in an abusive situation. There is help, you know, and then to go for the necessary family therapy, reach out for help. Again, as adults, we are not perfect. We also come from a conditioning, from a background that we need to heal, that we need to change and transform. Be the adult, take responsibility, do the work. You know, at the end of the day, you want to keep your unit, you want to keep your family, you want to raise children that are loving and kind and respectful, responsible human beings in this world. And by you behaving in an abusive way, what do you think the results are going to be? You know, you're either going to have a child that's going to be abusive like you, or that's going to be a victim, and go through this, and you're just going to repeat the cycle. So it's very, very important that we do empower our children as well, and that we as adults do take responsibility, you know, for our behavior. You know.
Yes. So Aadila, now we seem to have running out of time, but further topic once again, maybe some other time as well. So I hope, you know, to have another session so soon. So I would just request you to share your contact details first. And it was, you know, just gonna, thanks to you. It was really an honor and pleasure to have you for this insightful session, you know. So please share your contact details.
Thank you so much again for having me. I really appreciate it. My cell phone number is 0721 990 432, and my email address is Aadila, AADILA, at Phoenix, PHOENIX hyphen life, LIFE.co.za.
Okay.
And yes, you can also Google the website www.phoenix-life.co.za. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you so much once again. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye from our side.
Thank you, too.
Okay, bye.
Okay, salam.
Walaikum salam.